Where did swords come from? I mean, sure, we had them in feudal Japan, in medieval Europe, and in the Roman Empire, but how far back do we have to go to find the very first swords? That depends on what you classify as a sword, so buckle in, let's roll the clock back. Even today, some forces around the world still use swords, like the Gununting and the Bolo used by the Philippines Force Recon Battalion and the SAF, but these examples are rare and usually reserved for tropical terrain and specialist forces. One of the last issues of swords on a national deployment scale was by the Japanese forces in World War II, used by their officers and NCOs, the Shinganto. It was based on a traditional design from the Kamakura period, but between those periods we saw the rise and fall of the cavalry saber, last issued to US cavalry in 1934, having extensive military use in the Napoleonic Wars and really gaining its widespread following during the 30 Years' War. Around 1500 the rapier was born in Spain, along with the Zweihander in Germany, the Nimchaka in Morocco, and the Yugatan in Turkey. The 1400s saw the rise of the Great Claymore in Scotland, and the Cinquedea in Italy. But in the 1300s we saw the katana evolve out of the tashi, and the tashi itself was supposedly created in Yamato around 700 by Amakuni Yasusuna. Around this period the Carolingian or Viking sword saw widespread use in Western and Northern Europe, which is derived from the Migration period sword, or Merovingian period of European history, which itself is derived from the Roman Sparta. Now from here we have to break out of the categorization of post-classical, ancient and prehistory and start talking more in technological periods. Now these periods differ from region to region, so the timeline is just a general guide, but to the Iron Age. The Roman gladius started its widespread use shortly after the Dacian and Thracian Falx, which seem to have originated around about 300 BCE. Actually, Skallagrim did a video on a Falx by Wulflund. I'll put the links below. In the 5th century BCE, we have the Greek Xiphos and the Celtic Laten, the same era as the Iberian Falcata and the Greek Kopus. In the east, Goujian is first mentioned in the 600s, with one of the earliest specimens and most famous types being the sword of Goujian. And Metatron did an amazing video on this blade, which I'll also link below. The Goujian supposedly only reached modern lengths around about 500 BCE, which makes sense, because now we're hitting the Bronze Age. And we start finding blades like the shotel from around Ethiopia. Around 1300 BC, the khopesh emerged from Egypt, and in 1500s, the dao from China. But it's about here our records get really blurry, either because we find predecessors to these weapons that are more closely related to knives, axes, and tools, because we have no evidence of weapon migration or weapon evolution, or we find the same thing over and over, which brings me to the Bronze Age swords found in the Black Sea and Aegean region around about 1700 BCE. These were usually not longer than 30 inches or around about 80 centimeters, because making them any longer means they lost structural integrity. Arguably, this area really is the origin of the sword, because even though we can go back further, we don't really have any finds from outside this zone. In fact, we can go back much further, because the development of the sword from the dagger was very slow. But here, 5,000 years ago, in 3000 BCE, in and around East Turkey, we find the oldest known examples of weapons that we can really call a sword. These have a total length of 17 to 23 inches, or 45 to 60 centimeters, like the Arslantep swords. These early Bronze Age swords have been described by scholars as short swords, though that has been met with debate and discussion to categorize them possibly as long daggers. And going back any earlier than that is going to land us in the Stone Age, which means we find spears, axes, and knives, but no swords. So what do you think? At what length does a dagger become a sword? And let me know in the comments below if you saw a sword in this list that you'd like some more info on. But till next time, train safe, stay awesome, and stay sword savvy.